let me start the webinar and we could proceed.
Good, thanks, Joelle. Okay, let's call the meeting to order of the Water Supply Planning Committee of the Water Management District on August 2nd at 4 o'clock. I see the three members are here, so roll call not necessary, and myself, District 5, Mary Adams, and Karen Paul from District 5, District 5, District 5, Division 5.
Division 5. I'm District 5.
I didn't make that connection till just today. Okay, they may see if there's any comments from the public on any items not on our agenda.
But this time, if you would like to make public comment on items not on the agenda, now is your opportunity to do so by raising your hand. And Director Riley, I do not see anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We'll take it back to the board. The first item on our agenda, action item, is adoption of the minutes for May the 3rd. I have one question of just an accuracy question, but let's see. In the first item, well, item number 2, about midway through the paragraph, there's a line that says she reported whatever the district well, I'm sorry, deep injection well number 3 is to be completed in November 2022.
I meant 2021.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then
Right.
division deep injection well number 4 is scheduled for completion in 2022.
That's
okay.
correct.
That's okay. With that correction, I'd take a motion to approve the minutes. I move approval.
I'll second.
Moving
Great.
things right along. Call the roll, please.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Director Paw, Director Paw, Director Riley.
Yeah, aye. Passes.
Yeah, it
Okay.
passes.
And Joelle, I see that Larry Hampson and Thomas Christensen are as attendees. They need to be brought over.
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can now.
Okay, I don't know. Sometimes that happens. All right, I just got rid of my other devices, so I'll just use the computer sound. And I meant to vote for approval of the minutes with that correction.
Okay, well, if the record can show her vote for yes, I appreciate it. Okay, the discussion items, item number 2 is a presentation, I believe. So GM, you're going to start this off?
Well, I'm going to welcome Sarah Hardgrave from the county, from Supervisor Adams' office, who's working on the groundwater sustainability plan for this subunit of the Salinas Groundwater Basin. And Sarah, will you be screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll let you take it away to introduce the topic and then take control.
Great. Okay, let me share my screen.
Hi,
Hello,
Sarah.
hello everyone.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
yes.
All right, well, thank you everyone for this opportunity to just share some information with you. Supervisor Adams thought it might be good to share some of the activities happening in our office that are slightly outside of the district boundaries, but related to the district in some ways, and I'll touch on those. And our district covers the Corral to Tierra area of the Highway 68 corridor that goes all the way over to Las Palmas and the River Road area. And as we have been watching various water-related activities at the county, we saw that the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency was going to be undertaking development of the groundwater sustainability plans for the for the different subbasins that were not considered by the state to be critically overdrafted, but to be a medium priority. And so because the Monterey subbasin includes the Corral de Tierra area, Mary supported me in representing our office on the Monterey subbasin planning committee that's working on these groundwater sustainability plans. And so knowing that this group is paying attention to various water supply issues, we thought it would be good to just provide a quick overview of what is intended to be addressed by these groundwater sustainability plans. What is the Monterey subbasin, and how does that relate to some of the issues in the seaside groundwater basin? And then some of the recent findings and potential projects that are coming out of that planning effort. So I'm going to try to go through pretty quickly. I'm a visually oriented person, so I've put together some, let me make sure I can, some graphics to accompany my talk here. So very briefly, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is a pretty complex new piece of state legislation that is requiring, the state of California is requiring these sustainability plans for how we manage our groundwater systems for the first time ever. And it's a little bit of a wonky process that we've been going through, but this slide basically captures the goal of these groundwater sustainability plans is to avoid these undesirable results that may be bigger issues in some, some things may be bigger issues in some basins more than others. But in general, all subbasins are supposed to be addressing groundwater levels, groundwater storage, seawater intrusion, the possibility of groundwater quality being degraded, and then a problem that we don't have much here, but that's a kind of a bigger problem in the Central Valley, is land subsidence. So where so much groundwater has been extracted that the ground is actually sinking. And then also where extraction of groundwater may be impacting surface waters. So this entire effort that is being done by the groundwater sustainability agencies is to avoid any negative impacts in these areas. And of course, the biggest thing that we know is are the issues in Monterey County, is the seawater intrusion in the 180 and 400 foot aquifers. And these are the most recent maps from 2020 showing the gradual progression of seawater intrusion inland. On the left is the 180 aquifer, and it's extending towards Salinas, pretty close to the city lines. And then on the right is the 400 foot aquifer, which is not quite as far inland, but during the drought, the last more intense drought, these islands of seawater intrusion appeared that are sort of separated out from the 180, underneath. And that is likely being attributed to wells that are perforated into the 400 foot aquifer where the seawater from the 180 is leaking down into it. So this was the critically overdrafted basin identified by the state, and the groundwater sustainability plan for the 180-400 was submitted to the state in early 2020. And now the other subbasins are preparing their plans for a deadline that's in January 2022. So really, the purpose of this, of providing this information is to let you know about the public review period that's coming up for these different groundwater sustainability plans, and in particular to tell you a little more about the Monterey subbasin. The Monterey subbasin is adjacent to the 180-400, and it includes most of the city of Marina and the back side of Fort Ord, and then the Corral de Tierra area along the Highway 68 corridor. And so Marina Coast Water District itself formed a groundwater sustainability agency. So Marina Coast is taking the lead on development of the Monterey Subbasin Plan, because it mostly encompasses the Marina Ord area is the larger of the two management areas within the Monterey Subbasin. But the Corral de Tierra area is outside of their sphere of influence. And so the Salinas Valley Basin GSA is also working on this plan, and it's a collaborative effort between the two agencies. So I just basically said what's on this slide. So it's one plan that's covering the entire basin, but being adopted by both of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency boards will need to approve this plan. And it's being divided into two management areas. So the Marina Ord management area covers all of this back area of Fort Ord. And then the blue color is the actual Marina Coast Water District boundaries. And then the turquoise color is the area that's under the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And then the gray is showing federal lands, which technically are not subject to the state Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. But it's all one subbasin, and so we're planning for the entire area. There's some very interesting information that's coming out through this process, and this is one slide that I put in from the meeting that we just had last week. And I have to say, I did not create these slides. I should have said that at the beginning. I have borrowed slides from both Marina Coast and the Salinas Valley GSA presentations that have been given, and put a compilation together for you all today. The consultants to Marina Coast Water District are preparing, they've developed a model of the Monterey Subbasin that is proven to be a more robust model than the larger model that is being developed for the entire Salinas Valley. And everyone has agreed that Marina Coast's model is better for the Monterey Subbasin. And so that is the technical model that's being used for this effort. And they just presented some of the basic overarching information that they've found in their model in terms of a water budget for the Monterey Subbasin. And what this slide is showing is the so sort of the annual water budget that you see for the entire subbasin. And there's more detail. If you want to find out more detail, I can point you to where to find it. But just thought I'd share this overarching picture that, on average over the last, this time period that they have the data, that's the source of the model from 2004 to 2018. The average annual recharge was about 10,000 acre feet. The average well pumping was around 5,600 acre feet. And then these are not political boundaries, they're hydrogeologic boundaries, and they're not impermeable, they're quite permeable. And so there's water that's moving from the Seaside Basin into the Monterey Subbasin, that's moving from the ocean through the Marina Ord area into the 180-400 foot aquifer, that's coming off of the hills in Corral de Tierra and going into the Marina Ord area, and then also going into the 180-400. So overall, it's not like the Monterey Subbasin is one pool and just the people within that pool area get to draw the water from it, because the water is moving across basin lines. And I noted in particular the 900 feet of fresh water that's moving from the Seaside Basin into the Marina Ord area. it would just caught my attention, and because where that arrow is kind of in the vicinity of where the Pure Water Monterey and ASR injection wells are located. But in speaking with John Lear about this model, he has explained that the water that gets injected is flowing towards the depression that's in the Seaside Basin, which I'll show in just a moment. They have not yet figured out the projected water budget, sort of what are we planning for future scenarios. And you know, the purpose of this exercise is to identify projects or management actions to help avoid the undesirable results. And so that has to take into account, what is climate change going to do? Are there going to be increases in groundwater extraction? Are there going to be changes in land uses that are going to intensify water use? And then how do we actually do management actions that would help meet the measurable objectives that are being identified, and to have protective groundwater levels to reduce the risks of seawater intrusion further into the Monterey subbasin area. So in the Seaside subbasin, which of course is your territory within the Water Management District, I pulled this map that is from the 2020 Seawater Intrusion Annual Monitoring Report. And it shows up in the northern coastal sub area where CalAm has its primary seaside wells, there's a depression of the groundwater levels that's kind of centered around their, I think this is the Peralta well. And then there's also a depression that's centered around the pumping in the Laguna Seca area. And so it's this Laguna Seca area that is of particular interest in terms of the relationship between the Seaside Basin and the Corral de Tierra area. Because at the Water Master, it's been identified that the Laguna Seca area cannot be managed to a sustainable yield or protective groundwater level because of the influence of pumping that's actually outside of the Laguna Seca area and happening over in Corral de Tierra. So the pumping in Corral de Tierra is affecting the Laguna Seca area, and we really have to work together to be able to manage both of those subbasins sustainably. And then just a little more detail on that here. So this is Highway 68 corridor, and here up on this little blue spot is the Laguna Seca racetrack. And so this is the Laguna Seca golf course and the Pasadena area. And there are quite a few pumping wells in here. And then outside on this side of the seaside boundary, there are some other larger water systems, two of which are actually managed by CalAm, their Corral de Tierra Toro water system and the Ambler water system that are serving quite a few of the residents and homes around the Corral de Tierra Country Club and the Corral de Tierra general area. So that's part of why our office has gotten involved on the groundwater sustainability side, because of course, Mary sits with you all on the district and on the Water Master Board, and there's an interrelationship happening here. George, are you wanting to ask a question?
No, not specifically at this point. I do have questions
Okay.
though. I'll
Great.
go to the end.
Okay, all right, I'm going to keep trying to go through this fairly quickly. So the the Corral de Tierra management area is where we've really been focused, and we've been looking at this map. The color coding is land use, indicating land uses of some higher density residential, some open space golf course uses, lower density residential. The red areas are the areas that are served by larger regulated utilities. So Cal-Am serves over in this area that we were just looking at. And then over in Toro Park and the Las Palmas area, the water supplier is the California Water Service Company, which also serves the city of Salinas. So similar but different from Cal-Am. And then on all of these other areas, there are numerous small mutual water systems that are serving, 2 to 4 lots, up to 15 customers, some slightly larger systems serving small subdivisions, and then about 160 different individual domestic wells. So almost all of the pumping in the Corral de Tierra area is for residential uses, which makes this subbasin very different from the other subbasins in the Salinas Valley that are predominantly agriculture and dealing with very different issues. Because here we're really talking about the water supply for people. And the sort of disheartening outcome of some of the data that's been found is that the water levels in Corral de Tierra have dropped about 25 to 30 feet over the last 21 years. This is a graph that I don't want to try to explain all the things going on in this graph, but the MO stands for measurable objective. And this was an example of where we had a discussion about where should we set our goal of the measurable objective of where do we want to try to raise the groundwater levels to define our goal for sustainability. Did we want to set it to 2011, 2008, 2006? And I think we ended up somewhere in the middle, but it's just sort of an example of the undesirable results would be the chronic lowering of groundwater levels to the point that pumping isn't sustainable. So what are we setting our targets to? What is the measurable objective? But the real takeaway from this graph is that the groundwater levels are dropping, and pretty consistently. And then similar to, there's an estimate of sustainable yield in the Seaside Basin. They've calculated a sustainable yield for the Corral de Tierra area at about 1,700 acre feet per year. And that's based on 2019 pumping estimates and some other data that was available. And then the total amount of pumping right now is about 2,700 acre feet. So the difference is 1,000 acre feet. So the gist of it is that this Corral de Tierra management area is about 1,000 acre feet in overdraft, which is, why we see the groundwater levels dropping. So we've had quite a few discussions over the last 5 to 6 months about projects and management actions that could be taken. And they've identified a set of regional management actions that is really actions to be taken across numerous sub-basins in the Salinas Valley, especially looking at the deep aquifer, because there's been more wells being drilled into the deep aquifer, and that is also seeing groundwater levels dropping, but there's not as much known about it, nearly as much as the 180-400, so there's a need for more study. And then some valley-wide or region-wide projects. And they do have here a concept of a regional brackish water desalination that would be from intruded wells along the Highway 1 corridor, essentially from, quite a north of Marina towards Moss Landing. So along that, they've sort of identified Highway 1 as where they want to try to pull the ground seawater intrusion back to that location, which is a mighty big task given how far inland it is. And then Marina Coast has come up with some specific projects that they're working on. They're talking about some, this list doesn't have it on it, but they are also talking about maybe some similar kinds of groundwater replenishment as Pure Water Monterey, but replenishing into their actual Marina Coast area, closer to Marina Coast wells, as one potential concept. And then in our area, we've got this list of different things that might be done in the Corral de Tierra area, but they're pretty high cost per acre foot without a huge amount of benefit. So that's one of the really big challenges for the Corral de Tierra area. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I wanted you to know that this effort is happening. The schedule right now is that the draft plans are going to become available for public review in September, and there will be a 90-day public review period for these plans. And then both the Marina Coast Board and the Salinas Valley Board will need to adopt the plan more or less by the end of the year for submittal to the Department of Water Resources in January 2022. So hopefully there will be a fair amount of public input on the public comment period, and it's opening some space for conversations about our water supply issues that are sort of outside of the conundrum that the peninsula has had over water supply, and taking a different focus. So it's pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it at the end. So
yeah, thank you, Sarah. That was very informative. I'm also visual, so I appreciate your slides very much. I have a couple questions, but I'm willing to defer to Karen or Mary if you have something burning. Doesn't have to be burning, just something.
I have a live-in help. So we've gone through we have had an opportunity to kind of go back and forth on it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you have. Well, let me ask a couple questions. How much, I'm going to one of your middle slides, Corral de Tierra management area. It's where you have the mix of pumping sources or the production sources, whether it's private, individual wells, Cal-Am, Cal Water, and so on. Can we go back to that slide for a second? Just
sure. Let me share again and go backwards. Hold on.
there.
This one?
Yeah. To me, it looks a little bit like a microcosm of the Salinas Valley, where you've got a wide variety of pumpers and a wide variety of users, whether it's ag or open space or whatever. I know this is mainly residential, but the map looks makes me think of Salinas Valley. My question though is, how much of the data that you have is from actual metered data? How in this area, how much of it is estimates from just pump reports or electricity reports or something?
That's an excellent question, George. So anyone who is a customer of Cal Water Service or Cal Am is much more likely to be metered and billed based on actual usage compared to the smaller water systems or the domestic wells, which are mostly considered to be de minimis users under SGMA. So a de minimis user would be a single residential well that's using less than 2 acre-feet per year. But if you would like, I can provide you with a more detailed report that identifies all of the different water systems in the area and the number of connections to them, and then the estimated usage that is, you know, in the larger systems, like Toro Park and Las Palmas, for example, those are kind of suburban, medium density residential developments. And so you would expect that they would be comparable to like the amount of water usage in a residential lot in Pacific Grove or Monterey that's of the same general size. But the data did show that the per capita usage in the Corral de Tierra area is considerably higher than within the district boundaries and the Cal Am main system. They have not had the same programs or motivation to do conservation.
And it's all unincorporated, right? I mean, so.
And it's all unincorporated.
So the direction that would, if there is a direction to provide, you know, incentive or direction or priorities, would come from the Board of Supervisors, right?
I think it would probably come from the water purveyors more than the board.
Okay.
The Water Resources Agency has had some involvement, and there has been a fair amount of study in the past because of the sort of declining groundwater, limited groundwater has been a subject of debate whenever there's been new development projects proposed in this area. So there has been a fair amount of study of it. But in terms of who would provide the requirements for conservation, you know, the county would play a role if it was approving a new home that had to have a landscape plan and that was looking at the outdoor landscaping. I don't know how much the county, you know, really implements those. There's some state requirements, for example, for conservation of outdoor irrigation.
Well, and I can appreciate that it is de minimis on an individual homeowner because that kind of data probably is pretty insignificant in the big picture. My concern about the big picture, though, is that, and the SGMA in general, is that there is a deadline, there is a time frame for creating a plan and then implementing, you know, the plan. What I'm concerned, though, is that, you know, historically, and I'm going back to Salinas Valley mainly, but also it applies to our area here. Without precise data, you can't manage. I mean, how do you manage with estimates? I mean, I know you can, but the better management is with data, and the data comes from monitoring wells or metered use. And the county has, at least it seems to me, the first version of the SGMA plan that's been filed, by the way, which does include this section, doesn't it? I mean, from the county standpoint, it includes this section.
The only plan that's been filed was for the 18400.
Okay.
They did have a Salinas Valley wide plan, but it didn't get into very much detail for the other subbasins.
Well, what I've noticed, though, in that plan is that there's no metering required, and there's no, I mean, it seems like metering and moratoriums aren't even on the discussion list, much less an action list. I mean, am I wrong on that? I'd like to know where metering and, you know, moratorium concepts come into play in the discussion. I don't care what the action is. I'm not, that's hard enough. Is it in the discussion?
Yes, I think it is. there's definitely been a lot of discussion about the need for better data and the need for better monitoring. And there's an entire section, draft chapter that has been put together that describes the monitoring plan for this area and a fairly extensive monitoring network. The areas in this map here of the seawater intrusion with the question marks that are sort of along the boundary in Marina Coast territory, that's sort of on that frontal edge on the south on both sides. There's a real recognition of a need for more monitoring in those areas. It does seem like they have pretty good geographic coverage in the monitoring network into the Corral de Tierra area. There's always room for improvement. But I 100% agree with you, George, about the need for metering Salinas Valley wide. That's a political statement to make, but I think that there's a lot more understanding and agreement around that than there was 20 years ago when I had my first discussion around this, and the farmers absolutely rejected the idea of metering, and now they seem to really be coming around to understanding how important it is.
Yeah, well, I just want to back up and say, I don't necessarily think it's a political statement. I think it's a management statement, and I think there's a legal requirement about trying to get as much data as you can to manage the future, because that's where we're headed 20 years out and 40 years out. I mean, that's what the Sigma deadlines are. And I know it is political, but I consider it a management question. That's all. I'm gonna slow down and see if Mary or Karen, you want to go down some avenue of questions?
I have
Yeah.
a few. Mary, go ahead first if you like.
No, I'm fine. You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I have to follow up on the metering question. You said that the overall rate of use in that Corral de Tierra area is larger than in the is higher. So there must be some data available, and maybe not individualized, because the whole area, I take it, is not metered. That whole Corral de Tierra area, the individual homes are not metered. Is that right?
Again, it depends on which kind of system you're connected to. So if you're in one of the regulated systems of 200 connections or more, then you would have a meter. The smaller systems that report their pumping to the county, it's done on more of an annual basis rather than the monthly basis. So it's the frequency of that reporting that's also an issue.
So I have a few questions about, it's from what I understand of the Sigma, these management agencies, all the participating entities have to come to some agreement on measures eventually. And I'm sitting here just wondering, how on earth is that? I mean, can you envision that actually happening? People agreeing to, I will, let all these people who bought their land and homes in Corral de Tierra years ago, with no, maybe no notice that water might be limited in the future, agreeing to restrict their own use. How is there any, how do you get people to do that?
So what we've talked about on our committee, and what we've actually prioritized as one of the highest priority management actions, is to develop a pumping allocation system. So it's not necessarily allocating like a groundwater right, but it's saying, in order to achieve sustainability, everybody is going to have to pump within these limits. And then there'll be a look at all of the wells and have some proportional amount of the pumping that will have to be reduced, would have to be reduced to be within this pumping allocation. And so that's, that both speaks to the importance of having metered data to make sure that people would actually be complying with that, but also would be the overarching mechanism to get everybody involved, and maybe not coming willingly to do that, but actually having the mandate to.
And then who would be charged with enforcing that?
So it would be the Salinas Valley GSA, but I think that you know, there is a role for the county, there is a role for the Water Resources Agency, and one of the important sets of conversations in the coming months is going to be who really has the authority to do what. Because, for example, the county would be the agency that would have the ability to adopt a moratorium on wells, not the GSA. That would be the county. And the Board of Supervisors have contemplated that, and a majority of the board has not been willing to impose a moratorium on deep aquifer wells. There was one that was in place that Mary supported early in her first term, and then it didn't get extended.
Dave, I want to make sure you have some, if you want to say anything, jump in here, because.
Yeah, actually, Sarah, if you could go back and share the EKI water balance graphic with the little arrows on it.
Hold on, let me just pull it up and I'll share that screen.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify at the eastern tip of the Seaside Groundwater Basin, it shows a blue arrow going towards the Seaside Groundwater Basin.
Yes.
And I thought that most of the presentations about the outside influence was kind of the opposite, that the pumping in the Toro wells and other Corral de Tierra wells was lower in groundwater levels, which would result in water flowing out of the Laguna Seca subarea. And I don't know if that's true or if John Lear wants to weigh in, but
I could pull up, Dave, if you want. I didn't include it, but there is a Corral de Tierra graph version of this. So if you want to give me a minute, I could pull that up.
No, it's just that little blue arrow right at the bottom at the tip of the Seaside Basin. Is that the current understanding of flow? And then the blue arrow going from the Seaside Basin to the Monterey, so northerly, we used to always assume that there was a hydraulic barrier, if you will, because of the lack of wells in between Seaside and the Marina Coast area, that there wasn't a whole lot of flow. And I know that you did mention that as of right now, most of the flow is towards those depressions. And maybe that's why the blue arrow at the bottom is there, because the water's attempting to fill that Laguna Seca depression. But I'm just curious if this is the current thinking.
So I can share the specific, more detailed slide that was for the Corral de Tierra sub area, if you'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah, well, it's those arrows too, because as the Seaside Basin gets closer to sustainable yield, and then if CalAm does its 25-year of in lieu recharge, and we keep putting water in the ground from Pure Water Monterey, operating a reserve and any other carryover, will we start losing water in greater quantities that we've produced and injected?
I think, Dave, generally the water moving from the Seaside Basin into the Monterey is the northern eastern area of former Fort Ord, where there's not a lot of pumping. So there is somewhat of a moving boundary, as you stated, back and forth in that direction. The area in the northern coastal, where all of the injection is occurring and is planned to occur. It's much more hard and fast to the understanding that you were stating, where there is a flow barrier and the pumping on either side of that. When you move in, move more west outside of the influence of Fort Ord and the non-pumping in Fort Ord, it becomes much more of our understanding in the northern area of flow divide and pumping and the ability to capture injected water with well fields within the Seaside Basin.
A question, John, follow-up question. When you refer to flow barriers, these are naturally occurring barriers?
A flow barrier in this case refers to a hydrogeologic unit that is interconnected that could allow flow across the geologic unit. However, the sources of recharge and the sinks from pumping have set up a groundwater high in this region, mainly because of the pumping centers on either side. And then in the region where there's not any pumping, we have set up a groundwater high to which water that is recharged south of that high would recharge the Seaside Basin, and north of that high would go into the Monterey subbasin.
Can we go back to seawater intrusion for a moment? Sarah, this question I think is for Sarah. And I'm just beginning to learn about it and know very little about it, but it was my understanding that the fundamental cause of the seawater intrusion is the long time pumping from the Salinas Valley, occurring in the Salinas Valley mainly for agriculture and maybe for the city of Salinas as well. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I think as George said, there are a variety of kinds of users, groundwater pumpers. There's, you know, the community of Castroville, there's the city of Marina, there's the city of Salinas, there's various sort of urbanized pockets that have higher density residential uses that are served by groundwater wells. Then there's the dispersed agricultural wells all through the Salinas Valley. And yeah, it is pretty, I mean, I think the ratio of pumping is 90-10 ag to urban.
But is the Sigma, the basin management group, looking at that in any way at reducing the pumping in the Salinas Valley in order to address the seawater intrusion problem?
Yes, so each of these subbasins is doing a similar exercise in terms of figuring out the water budget for the respective subbasins. And of course, the 180-400 foot aquifer is the basin that has the most seawater intrusion, and by virtue of that, really the most overpumping. And it has that subbasin plan has a number of management actions and projects to be undertaken. There is debate over whether or not those are really truly adequate. And there's debate over whether or not the sort of target of achieving, you know, pulling back of the seawater intrusion, you know, trying to actually reduce it and pull it back towards the ocean. You know, the ways to do that are to provide replacement supplies, such as expansion of the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project, or finding new sources of water supply to serve the municipalities so that they have, you know, a more secure water supply rather than having wells at risk of seawater intrusion. I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question directly, but There are definitely management actions that have to be taken.
Mhm.
Whether or not they are achievable and adequate is, really what the discussion and debate is about in these next coming months.
Thank you, Sarah. I know it's complicated and there are a lot of aspects to it. And these extraction barriers to counter seawater intrusion, how do and you can defer this question if you want for a later time if we need more time, but how does that work, an extraction barrier? And is there such a thing, really?
I mean, it's a concept that when you have a well, so you have this well in the ground and the water, you have this cone of depression, the water comes down into the well and it's pulling the water from around it. And I think the idea is that if you had this array of wells sort of parallel to the ocean along the Highway 1 corridor that was extracting the brackish water, that would be creating this cone of depression that would actually be pulling in from the inland side. That's the concept, but I am not a hydrogeologist. So
Thank you.
that's my layperson's description of
Thank you.
what I understand it to be.
Thank you. That's a good start for me. Thanks very much, Sarah. And all the visuals were very, very helpful.
And Joel has these slides so he can share them with you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. This has been very good. And thank you, Mary, for helping to arrange this or however that works. You are ordered to go to this committee meeting. Anyway.
No, hardly, but I'll tell you, if you'll just allow me for a second, I just really so much appreciate Sarah's approach to water because it's something that she has worked on for so many years. And she really understands so much about it that I just highly value it. And it's added value to the District 5 office team without question at all. So I applaud her work and encourage her to pursue what it is that interests her so very much as well.
Well, and I think this is very informative, and it's a constant reminder that we have water dilemmas all over the county, and we can micro focus on certain areas, and it's as complicated in a smaller geographical area as it is in a larger geographical area. So this is just a reminder we have this. I do think the district will have an interest in this going forward. I mean, there are so many overlaps. Dave, maybe what I say may correct me if I'm wrong, but there's we're on the water master. We are interested in preserving and maintaining the seaside groundwater basin. We want it protected. There are edges around the basin that have invasions or depressions or overpumping or whatever. We've got potential, purchase of CalAm, which is going to affect Ambler and other kinds of things. We're going to, just looking long range future about how we provide water for the peninsula 30, 40, 50 years from now. And I just always want to keep in mind that if we're not looking 20, 30 years out, at least somebody told me this in Sacramento once, if you're not looking 20 years out for water, you're not planning. And so that's just kind of stuck in my mind that we've got to look long range, and we can't just continue to be, happy with ASR and happy with pure water expansion or whatever we're doing. We still got to continue and keep looking long range. Dave, you want to add anything to that, or is that an okay final to go to the next topic on our agenda?
That's a terrific final. I must say that we've layered in concerns about Toro and Ambler Park because of their proximity. Toro is contiguous. Toro has an interconnection with the Hidden Hills system. So we're very much interested in what's going on in that area. We will continue to be. But no, that was a great wrap up.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That was very informative. I do like your slides very much.
Yes, enormously helpful. And thanks so much to Mary and Sarah both for doing this for us.
Okay, let's go to the next item, which is item number 3, update on the Fort Ord shallow well number 9.
Yeah, and I'll let John kind of carry the load on this, but I do think the staff note was a very good introduction to both the Water Master's monitoring and maintenance plan, as well as the sheer number of wells that are out there, and a little more clarity on what our role has been and what the Water Master's needs are. So with that, John, I think this was very good background. Ultimately, we're trying to get to a decision or a recommendation on should we participate in cost sharing on a replacement well for Fort Ord number 9 shallow, which is where the conversation needs to turn at the end. But just in general, the historic layout that John's provided here, I think is really useful. So John?
Okay, thanks, Dave. As Dave stated, I did try to provide some background as far as the Fort Ord wells were drilled in the mid-90s. This was a component of time where the district is predating me, but from my predecessor, as it was explained to me, had been we're finally allowed access to the Fort Ord lands in order to drill wells in an attempt to define the subsurface conditions throughout this region of the seaside area. And these wells were drilled where they were allowed to have access to, and they became colloquially known as the Fort Ord wells. There are some scattered a long ways through Fort Ord. They were slightly different than the Fort Ord had a set of monitoring wells that they had established. It was, however, more focused on contaminant cleanup and in the area of marina. So these were wells that were more focused on trying to understand kind of globally in this northern area of the subsurface of the Seaside Basin. And the district installed these and maintained them for a number of years prior to the formation of the Water Master. And at the time of the formation of the Water Master, which I actually learned last week that Sarah, presenter of the previous item, was very involved with. So she may even have more insider answers, personal experience with this history that I'm trying to recap. A number of these wells that the district had were incorporated into the monitoring and maintenance plan for the Water Master, and the plan prescribes sampling regimes for these wells, to which the sampling is performed and then submitted to the Monterey Superior Court, accompanying an annual report, which is filed as a requirement from the adjudication decision. To move from the history to where we find ourselves now is that these wells are approaching 30 years old, and it's generally understood that small diameter PVC wells have around a 30-year lifespan. So it's not surprising to find Fort Ord 9 shallow as a compromised well. And then we have, as soon as we learned about this, we identified the problem with the county and moved with them to try to stop what the county health department is referring to as cross contamination in this zone. And this was the subject of many Water Master TAC meetings, and out of which the Water Master decided to pin the letters included in the staff note to Marina Coast Water District and the Monterey Peninsula Water District. And with that kind of concludes, I think, where we are with this well and the requests that are before the committee.
Yeah, so just an additional summary, we own the well. We have determined that it needs to be destroyed in conjunction with county public health. And that's what the planned action is. The beneficiaries from a monitoring perspective for this well are the Seaside Water Master and Marina Coast. And we don't see a functional need for district purposes anymore, other than we have been the contractor and are likely to remain the contractor to the water master. So pulling the data is something we would be doing, even though it's not for our own benefit. So as we begin to look at cost sharing, it would simply be as a courtesy and as a a member of the greater water community, if you will. And I think John has, especially through the attachment, shown that we cover about half of the wells in the area on our own, and then we cover the other half of the wells in the area under contract to the water master. So there's some data issues that if we no longer cover the water master, how you keep data consistent. Obviously, if Marina Coast takes over at least this well and some of the other wells in their GSA, we'll want some sort of seamless set of data that is available. But again, it's hard for us to justify 50%, maybe 20% is something we can talk about. But anyway, the story is all there, and I think we'll take questions.
Well, I kind of think, a third is a normal approach to this question with 3 agencies kind of participating in the data and so on. But if we have less need for the data and less use, value, it's less valuable to us. I'm more inclined to the 10 or 15% participation. And I do think we need to ring the bell on the water master about how they pay for things, because I do think they skip over too much open space around what's expensive, what's needs to be paid for around the water business. And I think they're just a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit too casual about going forward. So I would like us to not jump in and make it, anyway, I support your 10 to 15% idea. By the way, a question about this is the shallow well that's going to be, I don't know, terminated, or is it the entire deep well as well? I mean, is it the single shaft that's going to be, cemented?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There is the way that these particular wells were installed was a large bore was drilled, and 2 wells were nested together in them and sealed apart from each other. And we've worked with the county to destroy the shallow completion in the nested bore and retain the deep completion. So as long as we can execute the plan, which I believe we can, with the correct licensed consultant, we'll be able to save the deep bore and stop the cross-contamination of the shallow bore.
And that expense is on the district regardless, because it's our well.
That expense is out to bid right now for public work.
Mm-hmm.
And we will receive the bids back. I have had a loose estimate of 10 to 15,000. I have not seen any bids yet, so we should be receiving bids in about 2 weeks. It's out to bid currently.
And then my understanding too is that based on your memo, I think it's better if you're going to destroy one well when you got the equipment drilling another well. So the agreement, a 3-party agreement, needs to be accelerated if it's going to be on some time frame that's relatively soon.
There's actually a different set of equipment to drill a well and destroy a well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so we'll do this one as soon as we've got bids and award and mobilization, because I suspect an agreement for a replacement well is going to take some time.
I don't mind, Dave, if you use some of my wording about the water master needing to pick up the ball a little bit more on how they finance things. If you need it.
Yeah, well, we had a discussion on protective water levels a week ago. And it's clear that this is going to be a continuing problem for the water master to actually act on anything. You know, replenishment, replacement, physical assets. Yeah, there's no funding plan in place.
Well, if they ever hold a meeting, maybe we'll have a discussion about this issue. They cancel more meetings than they hold. My opinion. Any more comments on this? We'll go to the next item. If not,
Yeah, let's move forward.
okay, let's move to Pure Water project.
Yeah, so I think the staff note with the bullet points is pretty self-explanatory. I do want to focus you to look at your the executive schedule in your packet. If everybody has that, or Joel, if you want to put it on the screen, probably needs to be blown up a little bit on the screen. But the green is the base Pure Water Monterey project, the 3,500 acre feet. And there's something in here I would just want to highlight that undoes the comment made about the minutes from our last meeting. We now have a confirmed change order on the timing or the scheduling of deep injection well number 3 and number 4. So deep injection well number 3 moved a few weeks from November to December 10th currently. And deep injection well number 4 has moved up from March of 2022 to on here, December 23rd of this calendar year. So those are positive signals.
Yeah.
I think that shows some really good progress, and we're in a good place there. The blue is Pure Water Monterey expansion, and I want to highlight basically 2 things, maybe 3 things here. Down at the bottom, we're talking about the 5th deep injection well, and I know there's been discussion back and forth as to whether there should be 2 additional injection wells or just 1 additional injection wells. There's going to be a lot of looking at overall capacity that we will have with the 4 injection wells for the base project and a 5th injection well, and whether that remains sufficient to do a combined 5,750 acre feet per year or not. So the door is still open a little bit for adding a 6th injection well, but if you can work with 5 and cycle the backflush cycling and leverage the pressures that we need to get water up the hill, it may be that only 5 wells will be sufficient. But I can tell you, I've been in conversations with Cal-Am where we agreed a 2nd expansion well or a 6th well would make some sense. And I've been in meetings where the alternative has been discussed. This schedule just reflects 5. And then in the middle of this schedule, this is the kind of the advanced water purification process. And you can see that the wells, the 5th well is it could be finished much earlier than the advanced water purification. These have been designed now to come on simultaneously, as you see. But I think that the critical path is the facility expansion and startup. And so you can tell we don't even get out to bid and award. The notice to proceed is September of 2022. And so the notice to proceed on the well has been timed to go with that. But it's basically, you know, the additional design for the plant facilities is greater than the additional design that would be needed for the well facility. But nevertheless, we're in construction in September of next year with completion in December of 2023. So when people ask you how far away are we, you know, we're still about 30 months. But at least we have a schedule and it's out there publicly, and we're moving forward to design and getting ready for bidding in the spring of next year.
Dave, I've been getting a little concerned lately about the drought issues and maybe the repetition of droughts or the extended droughts, however that works. I'm a little more interested in a 6 deep injection well now than I would have been, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the projection going forward, when we want to assure that there's a volume capacity that we have to work with, and whether working with it is, the need for it is sooner or later, it doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that we can feel comfortable about the capacity question. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because there's two phases we're stuck with right now: the pre-pure water expansion phase and the post. So we need a way to get through those next 30 months. And Maureen has shown some numbers that, if need be, and we don't get a whole lot of rain, we're going to tap the reserves that we currently have, about 1,200 acre feet in the ground. That could happen over 3 years. It could happen over 2 years. If it happened over 1 year, then we're looking, if you get a 3rd year of drought, that we have a shortfall because we don't have this new project online. Once the project comes online, there is significant excess capacity in the project,
Okay.
which can build up, an additional drought protection for us. So when it rains, then ASR itself can provide waters to build up a drought bank. If it's not raining, the source waters for the expansion are relatively resilient, and we could use that excess capacity because there's not sufficient customer demand to use it all to build up a drought reserve. The current focus on the water purchase agreement has Cal-Am buying all the output of the expansion. So it would become their drought reserve. Whatever we produce, we're going to sell them and they're going to take it and it's going to go in the ground. But if we have, that much capacity, then we do need to look and make sure we've got enough injection capacity. The 5 wells seem to, based on their current injection rate, we have 2 wells and we're doing about 300 acre feet a month, 3,600 acre feet per year. If we have 5 wells, that's more than enough to meet the 5,750 per year, which would include the full delivery of the expansion of the 2,250. So we would be building up reserves at that point with those 5 wells, as long as I said before, we can utilize them or maximize their efficiency and push water up the hill and make sure that all 5 can be leveraged or cycled or made usable at the times that are needed. But I don't think an extra injection well gets us anything more other than security, because wells can fail, wells can go out, pumps can break, and so forth. But,
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, if we learned anything from the base project, more is better. So,
Yeah,
but it's also more dollars. So anyway, but this is how we intend to move forward.
Any other questions from the committee members? We can move to another item, which is not exactly an action item, but it's close.
Okay, just one small question, George, for
Yes.
Dave. Towards the end of the memo, is there a reference to soft costs for the expansion or for Pure Water Monterey?
Right.
And what does that refer to? I may have asked you this before, but.
Yeah, so that'll be primarily pre-construction costs, which will occur before a permanent financing is secured.
Okay.
You can rest assured the district will be asked to also begin to fund soft costs at some point, because that $2 million will get eaten up pretty quickly. And so our relationship with Monterey One Water was, we would fund 75%, they'd fund 25%. We both share in some reimbursement if there's a state revolving fund loan. We're seeking approval for what's called a WIFIA loan, Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, which created a lending program through the EPA. And if all those funding sources come home, then the project will be 100% covered once that permanent financing's in place. But yeah, soft cost pre-construction, that's, finishing of design, preparing of bid documents, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And you must, in doing the schedule, you must have had to make some assumption about the time it will take to get the PUC to approve a water purchase.
Yeah, there's a line, there is a line for that. And
Yeah,
it says expansion WPA. So it's the very first blue line and,
Yeah.
and PUC.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think it can happen sooner. I do believe that we had a call on Friday. I think we will see language by the end of this week that we can all live with. We're down kind of into semantics at this point, not performance related guarantees or some of the other bigger issues that we talked about early on. So we should be in a position, and then it comes down to whether it becomes an agreement through settlement of the complaint,
mm-hmm.
or if it goes through a normal application process with the briefings and the testimony and the hearings and so forth, the typical.
Yes, yeah, we've talked about that. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think, and this is going to be a little piece of risk where, the three parties will say, okay, we have a fundamental agreement on a document that we're pretty sure the PUC will approve. Let's go start spending money. But there's no, it's not guaranteed, but it would be hard to believe that the PUC would not approve it, or that any one of the three parties would suddenly get cold feet and say, oh, well, I've changed my mind. I think we're pretty well covered in that area once we all agree.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank
I mean, that's good news that you're still gentle with each other.
Well, we're also pretty
talking to each other.
Yeah, we're pretty straightforward with each other too. As you can imagine, during some of our previous discussion, there are some semantical issues or acronyms or names that we just don't want to see in certain parts of that agreement.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, good. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next discussion topic, which is the use of Sleepy Hollow in a new way.
Yeah, in a new way. Thomas Christensen will introduce this. I think you got the gist of it if you read the staff note, but it's an interesting proposition.
Yeah, so Larry's also here if there's any really technical questions about the facility, but I'll just summarize. Back in July, we got a call from NOAA Fisheries kind of asking about our Sleepy Hollow facility and asking if we'd be willing to have a conference call about what it would mean to have coho spawned at the facility. And the reason for this request is that NOAA Fisheries and the Monterey-based Salmon Trout Project have a facility called Kingfisher Flat, which is on Scotts Creek, just north of Santa Cruz. And that facility was pretty significantly damaged by the fires last year, as well as the watershed. And so last year they couldn't operate at all. So they had to take their operations up to a place called Warm Springs in Sonoma County. And I don't think it worked out very well for them as far as successfully, spawning these adults and then, getting young coho salmon, which is a endangered species, not threatened, but endangered, back into Scotts Creek. So they are approaching us kind of in this kind of emergency mode, saying that many of these facilities are struggling because of either lack of water in their traditional reservoirs and also maybe water temperatures, that they're wondering if we would entertain this idea. And so we're actually bringing this to you today just to update you on the conversation that we had. So they basically said, because of the damage at Kingfisher, they can't get their adult coho to spawn in that area. So they would like to potentially use the Sleepy Hollow facility. And one of the issues is we don't have currently large tanks that would accommodate what coho needs. So they said that they would actually provide these tanks. One of the complicating factors is that, you know, if they do want to provide these tanks, we are also planning our own upgrade and construction season this winter. So we're trying to bring to their attention all the possible constraints and complications, such as our construction season, the fact that there would be agreements would be need to be drafted. It would have to go before the board and have permission, as well as reimbursement agreements and response to alarms. Those are kind of the biggest complications of having an outside group using the facility and using the water intake system and filling these large tanks so that they could spawn the fish. Some of the good things that could come out of this is the partnership aspect. We operate under a lot of permits with NOAA Fisheries, as well as Fish and Wildlife. It would be good for the species itself. That they really are worried about a significant damage to the actual coho run in this southern part, which is kind of really just hanging on by its fingertips. And then there is this long-term situation where when Bureau of Land Management takes over the property, it's my understanding that there can't be an inholding of some sort of the district. It has to be a federal inholding. So at some point, NOAA Fisheries would potentially take the facility and then we would use it. But I guess the land and, you know, some kind of agreement would have to be carried out, which is, I'm not sure what the timeline is for that, but I could see that maybe in the next 3 to 5 years. So we haven't committed to this. We basically, it was a call to try to identify any fatal or a constraint that was so significant that there would just be no way that they could possibly pull this off. To date, that hasn't been identified yet. We did mention that the road is problematic in the winter, and we brought up all of our concerns. We said that the next step would really be to require them to come out to the facility and really see how it is operated, how it is run, and you know, what are the constraints in our current situation, and then continue the conversation. I don't know if Dave or Larry want to add anything to that.
No, I think that really covers it. Larry may have something, but yeah, this was totally oriented to let you know that this was being talked about, so there's no surprises.
Is there any reimbursement from the feds or state?
Well, so that's one of the issues is it would not be good form for us to be donating any assets or employee staff time without some form of reimbursement. The power bill out there right now, you know, the facilities in operation, I think we're probably around or above $5,000 a month.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're moving water, and so there'd be some cost sharing. How do you deal with wear and tear? I think I put it in the staff note. Yeah, under hurdles. You know, we pay for a contract for alarm response, and you know, we wouldn't be expecting to trigger a bunch of alarms in the winter if we're not using the facility. So, you know, if alarm response goes up, there's a few things that need to be dealt with.
Well, I'm all in favor of partnering as we can with, if they had a facility that would be useful to us, we would be reaching out to them. So it's the same, you know, back and forth.
Right.
Thanks for bringing this up. I can understand it's a lot more complicated. Coho is different than steelhead, I assume. They're different fish species. And would the coho be released in our river, or would they go back to Scotts Creek?
Yeah, they'll go back up. The incubation will take place up there. Most of their tanks were wiped out, so they're rearing facilities, but it seems like there's still some piece of the facility that works. But there's some practical problems here. They're not going to be able to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours every day. So they would be better served by, and they also have a lot of volunteers. We've not been in the business of letting volunteers come in, and I'm not sure we want to get in that business because, again, we have an access agreement. So you got the liability indemnification issue, but just on a simple practical matter, harvesting Milton eggs requires special certification. It's not everybody that can do it. And so, you either have to put somebody up in a hotel or get an apartment for 6 months or, something. And when you layer in all the complications, I think, Thomas and I talked, it might be more convenient and even more affordable to go get a already pre-made bridge and drop it into place if they could, a Bailey bridge. But who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Larry, do you have anything to add to the conversation?
The facility is pretty robust at this point. It's operating pretty well. It's got a lot of backup capability. I think the wild card is the winter. Hopefully we do get some really good rain. Yeah. The access is a question, and almost every year there's problems with access. So that would be probably the biggest concern for the National Marine Fisheries Service. But the equipment itself, the infrastructure, I think is pretty reliable. And the alarm system and communications are good. The facility went through the Carmel fire, operating on its own, with a lot of stress on staff, but it did come through. So I think, as far as can it perform during the winter? Yes. Is there good access? Well, that's a question mark.
Yeah, and we do have 2 slabs. So the 2 large tanks they're thinking of putting in, there's they take out one of our shallower large tanks, and which we don't use typically, and there's a slab under there, and then there's another open slab. So some of the infrastructure is in place.
Is there the possibility that they could take like a camper van in and somebody could just stay with it the entire time?
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty good option as far as National Marine Fisheries Service goes. And actually, we had talked about that during the facility upgrade, and staff kind of debated it and came to the conclusion that for security purposes, it would be great to have somebody there during the winter. So, I mean, if there's somebody willing to live out at Sleepy Hollow in 20-degree weather, well, good on you.
I bet there are a lot of people in that world that would just love nothing more than that. And a lot of people in my world too. Take me out of this.
Well, this is good. Thank you. Nice seeing you again, Larry, and Thomas and Dave. Thanks for all of that. Can we go to the last item for discussion, a verbal report on the Water Master?
Yeah, and I want to cover just briefly, and I alluded to it earlier. We met with the Water Master, both the chair, Mr. Bruno, and the technical lead, Bob Jakes, Monterey One Water, represented by Paul Shuto, myself representing the district, and Chris Cook representing the CalAm. And we just talked about where water could come from for protective water levels, who has funding capabilities. it was a bit of a challenging conversation because the water master didn't really want to talk about demand. And we kept reiterating excess water is a byproduct of how much demand you have. If your supply is fixed, water can only go two places: to serve people or to go in the ground. But we finally got there. I think we left them with some sense that Pure Water Monterey has close to sufficient supply to provide protective water levels. It might take an extra couple of years from what they'd like to do. But funding and how to purchase the water remains an open issue. The second topic I wanted to discuss, and John, I didn't mean to put you on the spot today. I should have given you a heads up, but we have not immediately renewed our service agreement with the water master. We've rewritten it to be more current for our current times and procurement needs. And we've given them a draft. John, I don't believe we've heard back yet, have we?
Yeah, they've responded, and Suresh and I have looked at it, and we are moving forward. There was a question about liability for the insurance that we're getting back, and then there is a request for services for next year for monitoring that the water master has forwarded to us under the draft agreement. So with the timing of all that, I would see probably the board and committees will be able to see the draft agreement possibly this month with the way things are going. Okay,
that's good to know, because they had some conversations with the County Water Resources Agency, and I imagine they didn't talk to any private consulting companies to do the work that we've been doing, but we want to get paid a certain way. We don't want to provide completely free services and free automobiles and that kind of thing. And so the form of the contract needed to change. They were thinking, well, then maybe the contractor needed to change, but it sounds like we're still it. So that's good news.
Yeah, good. They're difficult. I don't know. Never mind. It's difficult with the water master. Any questions, comments from the committee? The last little item is any suggested items for future agendas. Dave, I want to appreciate you and your staff bringing these items to our committee. You know, we wouldn't think of all the stuff that you bring. So I'm glad you're thinking about it.
Well, you know, with all of our committees, it kind of starts a month in advance of the meeting going, we don't have anything to talk about. Should we just cancel this meeting? And then as you get closer, and you know, this one in particular, there were a number of issues moving forward. But yeah, don't be shocked if water supply planning misses a month here in a month or two.
No, I'm okay. And I have no suggested topics for the near future.
Yeah, good.
Mary, Karen, any suggestions?
Not at the moment for me, no.
Okay, well, thank you, staff. Thank you, GM. Thank you all the people who are on the call that didn't speak up. But Dave, Fran, Karen, I'm not Karen, Sarah, I'm glad to get your presentation tonight. All right, yeah. Maureen, thank you. Joelle, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Bye now.